At issue this morning, the final push to find and persuade that small sliver of undecided voters. Millions of Americans have already cast their ballots as new accusations about former President Trump's past comments come to light.
Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley campaigned for Vice President Harris just last week in a key swing state. She joins us in studio with her take on the campaign and what issues she's focused on.
And we're going to take a closer look at Massachusetts Ballot Question 1. Should the state auditor have the authority to audit the legislature? At Issue starts now. Good Sunday morning and welcome to the latest edition of At Issue. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. We're kicking off a week of expanded coverage on our program. We'll be going live starting Monday night to get you ready for this consequential election.
This morning, we're going to take a deep dive into Ballot Question 1 in Massachusetts. It asks voters whether Diana DiZoglio should have the power to audit the legislature.
And Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is in the House. She's going to join us in just a minute.
Before we move forward, let's go back and see what was at issue over the past week.
An agreement has been reached on that property tax dispute in Boston. Mayor Michelle Wu says she's sending a new proposal to the State House after reaching a deal with business groups.
Elon Musk is running a $1 million giveaway to voters in swing states.
In New Hampshire, the current president campaigning for his vice president, warning of the dangers of a second Trump term and saying this.
We got to lock him up.
A lawsuit filed by 3 states in the Midwest aims to restrict access to the abortion drug mifepristone, and it could have an impact here in Massachusetts.
Said to Hanson now, where town officials say they've spent $3,600 all over a dispute involving a political image projected on the water tower there in town. While political signs are allowed on private property, they are not allowed on town property that's without a permit.
All right, just 9 days out from Election Day. Of course, we know elections are supposed to be focused on the future, but new accusations about former President Trump's past are raising questions about how he would lead the country if elected again.
John Kelly, a retired 4-star Marine general who was Trump's longest-serving White House chief of staff, spoke out to warn that he believes that Trump would rule like a dictator if he returns to the White House. In
an interview with the New York Times, the Boston native said Trump met the definition of a fascist and had no understanding of the Constitution or the concept of rule of law. And Kelly said that in private conversations, Trump admired dictators and said he wished he had military generals as loyal as Nazi leader Adolf Hitler's.
He commented more than once that, that Hitler did some good things too. Well, I tell him that. I said, first of all, you should never say that. Nothing he did you could argue was good.
And we should point out NBC News has not independently confirmed that reporting, and the Trump campaign says he never made those comments.
More recently, the former president is threatening to punish his political rivals. An NPR News investigation found that since 2022, Trump has issued more than 100 threats to investigate, prosecute, or imprison opponents. He recently referred to Democrats as, quote, the enemy from within.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. So sick, and they're so evil.
Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. And he is out for unchecked power.
Those comments from Vice President Harris delivered in Erie, Pennsylvania.
And that is where Massachusetts Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley campaigned for the vice president last week. Congresswoman Pressley, who represents the Commonwealth's 7th District, joins us in studio today. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Great to see you in person. All right, last time we saw you, you were coming back from the DNC, so that was a high. We had a good time in the waiting room there for the plane. Look, we listened to that soundbite about President Trump, former President Trump, about the enemy within, talking about using the military, the National Guard. He's said against, American citizens, against his political foes. You were at the Capitol on January 6th that time, and it was a terrible time for America. When you hear him say those words, what's your reaction?
It's chilling, and it's more of the same. He is dangerous. He traffics in hate. I think oftentimes what he's offering is to distract and to deflect. from the fact that he doesn't have a vision for this country. He doesn't have a policy plan. His only vision is one that has to do with himself, and it's a politics of revenge and retribution. But to refer to Democrats as the enemy within, I mean, it harkens back to a time that we do not need to return to. He's unfit to be the president of the United States of America.
You take him seriously when he says that?
I take him seriously because I've been in Congress now for 6 years, and these extremist Republicans have proven time and again that they don't make threats, they make promises. And Project 2025, and this is the thing about them, is that they do telegraph their harm. The fact that they've put in black and white in this 922-page far right-wing manifesto, which is not just some extremist wish list, it's a playbook. And it's a playbook that means harm to every person that calls this country home, seeking to dismantle the federal government as we know it. And so the stakes could not be higher, the contrast more clear.
Can you give a concrete example to people watching at home? Because we talk about, Project 2025, and I know that the vast majority of people don't know what it is. We've read it, you've read it, you're in a task force around it. Is there an example you can give people if Trump is reelected and they enact Project 2025? What's an example for someone at home that they can understand what that blueprint would deliver?
Well, I mean, there are many devastating plans, and one of them includes dismantling the Department of Education, complete defunding of Title I K through 12 education, and eliminating Head Start. In my district, I have about 11,000 low-income children who need that Head Start programming. The other is that I would speak to is using Schedule F, executive action, for a massive firing of dedicated public servants, replacing them with Trump loyalists and sycophants. And that's actually in real time already. They have an online portal that you can apply to that tests your loyalty with a series of questions. And so there are about 3 million federal jobs. Trump, again, in trafficking hate, tried to infer that Haitians are coming for black jobs. He's actually coming for black jobs. 1 in 5 of those 3 million federal jobs are held by black Americans. So you're talking about 600,000 people who stand to have their livelihoods impacted.
All right, let's talk about the woman who wants to beat Trump in this election. You were campaigning for the vice president in Pennsylvania. What are you hearing on the ground, specifically from maybe those undecided voters, those Democrats who maybe agree with her on 90% of things, but have that one or two issue where they say, I just don't know if I can pull the lever for her?
Well, one of the other things that Project 2025 lays out is that the overturning of Dobbs is just the beginning. I mean, they are in this extremist march that they've enlisted the Supreme Court in. And what I hear from people on the ground, and I've been in a number of battleground states, I will speak to Erie, because Erie is a battleground within a battleground, right? As goes Erie, so goes Pennsylvania, so goes the country and the road to the White House. All roads to the White House go through Erie. And what I hear from people is that they're very clear about the contrast here. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance mean to take us back. I mean, not just to Jim Crow, then some. They mean harm to every person that calls this country home. They want to control every facet of people's lives, from the womb to the bedroom to the classroom. They want to ban books. They want to ban bodies. They want to defund diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. They want to dismantle the federal government. Donald Trump calls for the termination of the Constitution. So they're clear about the contrast. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are about the restoration of freedoms that have been gutted, expanding those and taking us into the future. So what I hear from people is that they are very clear about the stakes, and where there is daylight distilled, where people disagree, they are still planning to vote for Kamala Harris. And this is from independents and Republicans and Democrats, because those policy differences, when you're talking about the very integrity and existence of our democracy, people are very clear. And then finally, I would say they know that Kamala Harris is committed to lightening people's loads, to making your life easier by reducing the cost of housing, of prescription drugs, of groceries, but also of harnessing your innovation, which is why I'm so excited by the response to not only her vision for an opportunity economy, but an opportunity agenda specifically for black men.
We often talk about, not necessarily from a polling standpoint, but so you often point out that Trump seems to have this ceiling, this 48, 49%. From on the ground where you are you seeing Kamala Harris and the campaign expand what we would consider, quote unquote, the base, pulling in maybe some reluctant Republicans who aren't on Team Trump and who aren't MAGA, and maybe some of those voters who aren't always engaged in the political process?
Yeah. So two things. I was a national surrogate for Hillary Clinton when I was a Boston city councilor. She talked a lot about the Supreme Court. I think people didn't get it. They're not motivated around an abstract idea. But now that we've experienced the harm of a Trump presidency and a weaponized Supreme Court, people really do understand that. And so for that reason, I have had many conversations with Republicans who have said, I plan to vote for Kamala Harris because I have a daughter, I have a wife that had a complicated pregnancy, and they would have might not still be here if they would not have been able to access abortion care. For many people, January 6th, complete game changer. For many people, Donald Trump saying that he'll be a dictator on day one, that he wants to terminate the Constitution. Kamala Harris's speech in Erie, Pennsylvania, where she talked about country over party, really resonated with a lot of people. I've seen that be incredibly helpful in our building this coalition. And in comparison to 2016 and 2024, Democrats, we would go to Georgia and spend the lion's share of our time in Atlanta. We would go to Pennsylvania, spend the lion's share of our time in Philadelphia. But now we've stood up infrastructure all throughout these states. I mean, I'm in a lot of rural places as well. So we are expanding this coalition, and as Kamala Harris has said over and over again, there is more that unites us than divides us, and there's room within this coalition for everyone. And so I am seeing my job as a surrogate is to make sure that those people that are committed remain mobilized and motivated. We can't take our foot off the gas here, and we have to work for every vote until the end. And then for those that are uncommitted, that they are informed and clear about the stakes and the contrasts.
If I told you 10 years ago that you and Liz Cheney and the Cheney family would be on the same side in a presidential election, would you have asked me?
I would not have wagered that bet. I certainly would not have. But again, this is a coalition that continues to grow, and it's incredible what we've been able to accomplish. I mean, it's an anomaly, such a short runway to offer a vision for the country, to get that infrastructure together and to build a winning coalition. But I see it, you know, a new battleground map has emerged in real time, and a broad and diverse coalition of people from every walk of life. I've seen that. I've spent time with child care providers, with entrepreneurs, with college students, in interfaith community. And I'm just most excited about the number of people that I've met, that this is the first time they've donated to a campaign, the first time they phone banked, the first time that they've door knocked, the first time they've traveled to work on a campaign. I know in Massachusetts that's old hat, but I think that really is, you know, because we're deployed to so many different places.
Well, someone they've got deployed now, obviously, is former President Barack Obama, who's been out campaigning in Pennsylvania. He spoke to a group of young men about his concerns why some black men may not be supporting the vice president. Let's take a look.
Part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that.
So, of course, he made perfect sense to me, and then it was pointed out to me that that's how I talk to people sometimes, and I don't affirm their feelings, and I don't...
Never been my experience. I find you deeply empathetic, sir. Never been my experience. Yeah.
So, how's that going? I mean, you know, some people thought he was scolding. I've heard from some black men saying I didn't need him wagging my finger at me, and then other people saying he's just saying what it is. What do we do?
Well, let me just say this.
Yeah.
Look, again, I've been in Congress for 6 years, and in the 118th, we've been under a Republican majority. They have governed, and I'm saying this generously, with chaos and dysfunction. That has contributed to a deficit of trust of government and institutions. So there are many people that are frustrated, you know, again, across every walk of life. So I want to hold space for anyone's experience if they're just feeling skeptical, okay? But I would say that is not my experience with the majority of black men. Black women and black men continue to decisively and overwhelmingly vote Democratic. And moreover, Kamala Harris recognizes the role that black men have played, that they play in community as coaches and mentors and innovators and entrepreneurs and educators. And that's why she rolled out her opportunity agenda for black men, which tackles everything from addressing those disparate health issues, from prostate cancer to diabetes to colon cancer, and also harnessing black innovation and entrepreneurship. And one of the bills that I wrote with Kamala Harris when she was United States Senator is a tenet of that opportunity agenda for black men, and it's to provide access to capital for 1 million Black entrepreneurs, and that was inspired by a bill that she and I wrote called the Saving Our Street Act. I want to give a shout out to Beckman, the Black Economic Council for Massachusetts, because they worked very closely with me, and that ultimately became the foundation for that bill. So once again, Massachusetts, all roads lead to Massachusetts. We're always leading and contributing in some way, and I think the fact that she wrote that agenda out, and I have to be clear, listen, it is notable that she is a woman and that she is a woman of color, and that is deeply meaningful. And it is notable that she's rolled out this agenda specifically to address the needs and aspirations of Black men. But she's running to be a president for everyone. And she wants to, again, lighten people's loads, but also make sure that their aspirations and their dreams can become a reality. When she talks about this opportunity economy, I just see a light go off for people that they understand that she and Tim Walz want to build that more just and inclusive America that centers the dignity and humanity of every person, every family model. I say that as a proud bonus mom, and every individual.
All right, so looking at the early vote data that's come in, specifically in those swing states, your Michigan, your Pennsylvania, it seems like places like Philadelphia, Detroit, they're doing their thing. But when it comes to Michigan specifically, is there still concern about what the ongoing war in Gaza will mean come Election Day, and whether some folks who would vote for Kamala Harris, where this not going on, may decide to stay home?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, we always have to hold space for what is unimaginable grief and trauma and center the humanity of the Palestinian people. And I take Kamala Harris at her word that they're working around the clock to get us to a permanent bilateral ceasefire. I appreciate that she has centered the humanity of the Palestinian people and talking about how much they deserve to be safe and free. But at the end of the day, this is about meaningful and concrete policy choices. And one thing that we can do, in addition to a bilateral permanent ceasefire, one thing we can do right now is an offensive arms embargo to stop U.S.-made bombs killing women and children and contributing to this genocide or creating this genocide. Now, that being said, not only do I think that that is the moral thing to do, because we have got to save lives, there is also a political calculus there. This continues to be an issue of priority for many people in my district, but many people in these key battleground states who want to see more decisive action and more of a leveraging of every diplomatic tool available to us to save lives.
So as we finish up here, I want to take you back in time 10 years ago when you were on the Boston City Council. She's getting nervous. It's okay. It's a good thing. And you were working on the issue of liquor licenses for neighborhoods. And finally, you know, some have been shaken from the tree. 225 licenses are going out. How do you feel about that success and how long it takes to see the fruit of your labor? And is it time for that home rule petition where every mayor has to ask every state legislature for permission to do things here in Boston? You feel good, and do you think it's time for the home rule to go?
Yeah, I feel encouraged, and I think we should continue to build upon these efforts. You know, it's hard to believe that those initial reforms for those 75 liquor licenses that we worked on when I was in at-large Boston City Council, we did that for 4 years with 2 mayors. It was the last action on Tom Menino's desk, and then worked with Mayor Walsh and the legislature. And so now, and Governor Patrick signed that into law. And now here we are with the Healy Driscoll administration, decisive support from the entire Boston delegation, grateful for the leadership of Councilor Worrell, Rep. Worrell, and Senator Miranda. And what is incredible as they build upon that legacy is that they barely have to make the case anymore. I think people can finally agree that that was an unjust status quo that did a disservice to many communities, and we all deserve to have access to walkable amenities in the form of these sit-down restaurants. It is public health, it's public safety, it's economic and job growth, and we all deserve to be able to go in our neighborhoods to celebrate life's milestones. And so I remember at one point at the State House, Governor Healy had forgotten to mention a couple of people. And I said, listen, it's understandable, but if this was 10 years ago, you wouldn't have forgotten anybody because this many people were not standing here. But now, you know, there is a diverse and deep coalition of those in hospitality and restaurateurs. It was a real team effort here. And so I'm glad that we don't have to fight so hard to make the case anymore, and people understand it's just a matter of equity.
All right. Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, thank you so much for joining us. Safe travels on the campaign trail.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, we are diving into Massachusetts ballot question number 1.
All right. So this is about State Auditor Diana DiZoglio's push to audit the legislature. She walked across the state on foot to promote it. Why some are questioning whether that push is even legal? That's coming up.
Welcome back to At Issue. We know over the past few weeks, our team here at NBC 10 Boston has done a series of reports on the Massachusetts ballot questions. Our goal is to help you better understand what you're voting on.
We'll start with question 1, which asks you, the voter, whether the state auditor should have the authority to audit the legislature. The current state auditor, Diana DiZoglio, is an ardent supporter of the measure. But
opponents question whether a legislative audit is even necessary or constitutional. Diana DiZoglio's successful run for state auditor was built on the promise that if elected, she would audit the legislature. 2 years later, she's leading the campaign for ballot question 1.
Question 1 would bring on the sun. Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Bay State voters are being asked whether the office of the Massachusetts state auditor should have the authority to audit the legislature. DiZoglio's answer is a resounding yes.
Bills are able to be passed in the middle of the night with no recorded roll calls. Committee votes oftentimes don't take place, so we can't track how people voted. Those are all matters of concern for the general public.
Under current law, the auditor's office has authority over all departments, offices, commissions, institutions, and activities of the Commonwealth. Question 1 explicitly adds the legislature to that list. DiZoglio says an audit would shine a light on what many consider to be one of the least transparent legislatures in the nation, not only peeling back the curtain on the legislative process, but also showing voters how their tax dollars are spent on things like hiring, state contracts, and non-disclosure agreements. Leadership on Beacon Hill has been vehemently opposed to DiZoglio's efforts and have so far refused to work with her office.
We get audited every year already. She fails to mention that fact.
DiZoglio believes taxpayers deserve more. But according to the Center for State Policy Analysis at Tufts University's Tisch College, a yes vote would not give the auditor's office oversight of core legislative functions like committee votes, debates, and committee assignments.
We are not seeking to access anything that would influence their core legislative functions. We would be seeking to simply report on what has already occurred.
Those opposed to DiZoglio's efforts also question whether she has the legal authority to audit the legislature.
Her argument about having statutory authority is a very bad one.
Gerald Duquette is a political science professor at Central Connecticut State University and co-founder and senior contributor at masspoliticsprofs.org. He says DiZoglio's legal argument does not hold weight and that an executive officer, like the auditor, does not have any oversight of the legislature.
She is selling this as if it would only clarify authority that she already has constitutionally and statutorily. And unfortunately, she's very wrong on both counts.
Ahead of November's vote, DiZoglio is walking the length of the Commonwealth, trying to convince voters to say yes. She says she has the support of some rank-and-file lawmakers and believes they, like taxpayers, stand to benefit from a legislative audit.
We can support our state legislature, and we can also support transparency. Those things are not mutually exclusive.
The Center for State Policy Analysis found no examples in the U.S. of legislative audits being conducted without lawmakers' consent. And even if passed, the legislature could use its budgetary power to handcuff the auditor or even defund the office altogether, though such an effort would likely wind up in court. You can find more information on all 5 ballot questions on our website, NBC10Boston.com.
And we'll break down each of the ballot questions as we go live all of this week. Starting tomorrow night at 7:30, we'll have a deep dive on the important races and topics tied to this year's elections.
And tomorrow night, Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to join us in studio to talk about her re-election campaign and her challenger, John Deaton. Plus, we'll get her thoughts on the presidential race.
Plus, we'll hear from 2 teachers on opposite sides of question 2, which asked you, the voter, whether the MCAS graduation requirement requirement should be repealed. They're going to join us on set, too.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of At Issue. Again, we are back tomorrow night at 7:30 for live election coverage and analysis. But thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Corey Smith.
And I'm Sue O'Connell. Have a great day.